Betrayal and Redemption. In the bustling streets of New York City, where ambitions thrive and dreams are built, lived a couple whose love story once painted the town with hues of happiness. John and Sarah had been high school sweethearts, weathering storms and celebrating victories together. John, a diligent financial analyst, poured his heart into providing for their modest life, while Sarah, a talented interior designer, added color to their home and aspirations. Yet beneath the facade of their perfect life, cracks began to surface. Sarah, feeling neglected amidst John's demanding job, found solace in her career and the charismatic charm of her boss, Daniel. His compliments turned into conversations, and soon, Sarah found herself entangled in a web of emotional dependency. The late nights at the office turned into dinners, and dinners into secretive meetings. John, oblivious to the emotional distance growing between them, threw himself deeper into his work, hoping his efforts would one day provide the dream life they both desired. One fateful evening, John decided to surprise Sarah at her office, only to discover her in an embrace with Daniel. The world around him shattered as the truth unraveled before his eyes. The betrayal cut deep, but amidst the pain, John found a resolve to confront Sarah. Heartbreak and tears followed, but in the midst of chaos, John made a decision to fight for their love. He confronted Sarah, pouring out his hurt and longing for the days when they were each other's everything. Sarah, torn between guilt and desire, faced a choice that would redefine their future. Through tears and heartfelt conversations, John and Sarah rediscovered the love that once bound them. They sought counseling, where they learned to communicate and rebuild trust. Slowly but surely, they navigated the storm, emerging stronger and more committed than ever. As time passed, the scars healed, leaving behind a story of betrayal overcome by forgiveness and resilience. John's dedication and Sarah's remorse paved a path towards a renewed marriage, where love, tested and purified, found its place once again. The silence that screamed. After the confrontation, Sarah sat silently on the edge of their bed. John stood at the doorway, his hands clenched, trying to hold himself together. His voice had cracked only once when he asked, "Why, Sarah? Was I not enough?" Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her words didn't come easy. "It wasn't about you not being enough, John. It was about me feeling invisible." That night, the house was cold, not because of the temperature but because two hearts, once intertwined, now stood worlds apart. John slept on the couch. The walls that once echoed with laughter now absorbed silence. In the days that followed, John moved through life like a ghost. He still went to work, still made his coffee, still smiled at the receptionist, but none of it felt real. Every moment replayed the image of Sarah in another man's arms. Sarah, on the other hand, ended her affair with Daniel the next day. It wasn't a dramatic breakup. Just a quiet realization that what they had was built on emptiness. Daniel was disappointed, but Sarah didn't care. She had burned her home for a fantasy, and now she was standing in the ashes. Counseling or goodbye? One evening, John came home and found Sarah sitting at the dining table. There were 2 cups of coffee untouched. On the table lay a pamphlet for couples counseling. "I know I don't deserve it," she said before he could speak. "But I'm asking. Not for me. For what we were. For what we could still be." John sat down. "Do you really want to fix this, Sarah? Or are you just scared of being alone?" Sarah looked him in the eye. "Both. But mostly, I want to fix it." They started attending therapy sessions with Dr. Elaine Morris, a middle-aged woman who had helped dozens of couples rebuild from the ruins. It was awkward at first. John didn't want to speak. Sarah cried through most of the early sessions. But Dr. Morris encouraged honesty, even if it was ugly. "Sarah," the therapist asked in one session, "what did you feel you were missing from your marriage that you found with Daniel?" Sarah swallowed hard. "I felt seen. Daniel listened. He noticed when I changed my hair or when I was sad. With John, I felt like I was a ghost in my own house." John's jaw tightened. "I was working for us, Sarah. For our future." "I know," she whispered. But I needed you more than I needed the future. Small steps. The road to healing was long. Trust once broken didn't return overnight. But John started noticing things he had ignored before, like how Sarah always made the bed with hospital corners because she liked it neat, or how she hummed when she cooked pasta. Sarah, in turn, began being patient with John's quietness. She didn't push him to forgive. Instead, she showed up, every day, with sincerity. They began doing small things together again. Grocery shopping turned into coffee dates. They watched old movies on the couch. They started talking about the early years, when they were broke, in love, and happy. One night, after a long walk, John finally asked, "Did you love him?" Sarah paused, her voice trembling. "No. I loved the attention. But I never stopped loving you." That was the first time John allowed himself to cry, not out of anger, but out of relief. Because despite everything, a part of him still hoped. A different kind of love. Months turned into a year. Sarah found a new job with a small design firm, far from Daniel's shadow. John started prioritizing work-life balance. They traveled together, nothing fancy, just road trips to small towns in upstate New York. They renewed their vows on a rainy spring afternoon, just the two of them and the officiant under a white gazebo in Central Park. There were no guests, no photographers. Just two people who had broken, healed, and chosen each other again. As the officiant read, "Do you, John, take Sarah again, this time with eyes wide open?" He looked at her and smiled. "I do." And when she repeated the words, her voice cracked with emotion. "I do." They kissed in the rain. The letter he never sent. A year later, John found a letter he had written the night after the affair was discovered, one he never gave to Sarah. "Sarah, tonight I saw a version of you I didn't recognize, and a version of myself I never wanted to meet. I am broken, not because you fell in love with someone else, but because I didn't see it coming. I want to hate you. But I can't. Because despite what you did, I still love you. And that's the worst part. That love doesn't die with betrayal. It only sleeps, waiting for a reason to wake up. I hope I can forgive you. I don't know how. But I hope. John." He folded it and tucked it back in the drawer. It didn't matter now. They had made it. Final chapter, not perfect but real. Years passed. They weren't the same couple they once were. They were stronger, more aware, more grateful. There were still arguments, of course. Some days were harder than others. But they had learned the value of checking in, of speaking up, of holding each other's hand even when angry. Their love was no longer a fairy tale. It was a weathered, scarred, and beautiful story of two people who refused to let go. John often told friends, "We're not perfect. But we're real. And sometimes that's better than perfect." And Sarah, whenever she looked at John, knew one thing: love, when it's chosen again after being broken, is the strongest kind of love there is.